who in a must-win game against their most hated and historic rivals, DC United called on some vintage Benny Ball tactics, if you will, to pull out a 1-0 win as we welcome you in to Tried and True, the Atlantic Cup Champions podcast presented by Heineken. We're all here again. John, Joshua, Sam, and Michael. And guys, right back in the thick of it.
Yeah, John, you pointed out in the stadium, Hernan has won every trophy that we've been up for. We won,
every single one.
We won the Capital Cup this summer against a deep field consisting of LD Alawense and LD Alawense. And tonight you wrap up the Atlantic Cup with another 1-0 victory of the Red Bulls. It feels good. It feels a lot better than it felt this weekend. That's for sure.
Yeah, and he's...
Wait, did we play at the weekend?
No. There was no podcast, right? So no podcast.
Doesn't count.
Yeah. I think you're onto something, and it could have been we could be in pretty dire straits right now, but he's still in the running for MLS Cup, so maybe he keeps this trophy thing going. He called tonight the first of 3 finals, hopefully first of 4, but we got the win, so I'm feeling good about it.
7, 8, yeah. Hopefully a longer run.
Well, I meant the actual MLS Cup
gotcha.
final, but yeah, we can invent as many finals as we want along the way. I'm for it.
No, I was gonna also comment on I love that he's calling each of these games a final because they're all essentially must win, and maybe that's why he's winning all these cups for us, right? He's just going in with the mentality that there's a cup on the line.
Yeah, and tonight Sam gave me a little bit of a look during the intro. I don't know if that's because you disagreed that it was not Benny Ball, or just the fact that you don't love that. That's
no,
what we had
I was
to
just
do,
giving
but,
you a look because before the game you said, I hate to say it, but I think Benny Ball's going to win
I
us
know,
this
man.
game. And
it kind of did. Look, we can talk later on about later on in the offseason about what Losada's learned from this season, but definitely going into the year, this was not. Never in a million years I think we'd see this again with him. He was very hell-bent on we're going to play our style, but dude's been dealt some tough hands lately, and tonight, they got the early goal. Kevin Paredes put one away. It was kind of basically off a rebound. It was a great finish, and from there, they held on.
Yeah, it felt very much like a vintage DC performance as far as saying, hey, we're going to get a goal, and then we're going to batten down the hatches. You're not going to score on us. The Rebels didn't have a whole lot of opportunities that really scared you. I think if you look at the XG afterwards, the Rebels will have about twice of what DC had, but we got what we needed and then set up shop. And I think to your point, John, it's a very different style than what you would have seen back in April or even June from Losada, wanting to play his style. Instead, he treated it like a game that mattered because DC had to have points out of this game and pretty much had to have the 3 points. They did what they needed to do to get it. It's hard to be upset about that.
yeah, it was Benny Ball, and the fact that maybe we were sitting back a little more. It was not Benny Ball a la last season in which we were just absorbing shot after shot after shot. Like, Black, to your point, every minute of the second half was a little bit longer than the last, definitely. Bill did, I think, come up with some really big saves that kept us in this game and kept the 3 points for us. But you're right. I don't think we escaped by any means with 3 points. Like, they were pretty earned, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think points were stolen. And, interestingly enough, I was going to kind of talk a little bit about how it felt like we were able to take advantage of a little bit of a rotation of players there in that second half. But, I don't want to bury the lead. The biggest story, potentially, of the game was the miraculous recovery of both Paul Arriola.
Yeah, I was going to let you introduce it, but
I was ready for it.
At the end of the show, we always try to give you guys a heads up on when our next show will be, what we're going to do, who's going to be there. But maybe we should just start lying about who's going to be there because it leads to success later on.
And there's no accountability, apparently.
No, except that we don't hate you guys, so we will tell you the truth.
But Hernan doesn't hate you either. He's just trying to win.
No,
That's
Hernan
right.
hates golf, so.
If you're not tracking what we're putting down here, the injury report, which obviously means nothing now, came out earlier this week, and both Paul Arriola and Andy
not
Nahar,
earlier this week. Last night
were
today.
ruled out. They were listed as out, which in any sport I've ever followed means that you are not eligible to play in the game. DC United actually inadvertently kind of tweeted out the lineup a few minutes early, and some folks kind of picked up on it and were like, oh, well, that's awkward. They tweeted out this lineup with, two of these players that are out in it, and they just tweeted the same graphic again at the real time because that was the lineup, and two guys who, I think we were all kind of devastated weren't going to be playing.
Yeah.
They were targeting a return tonight for Paul, and we didn't really know what was going on with Nahar, but they both played, and they both put in a shift in that first half.
And a return for Heinz Eich as well. Yeah,
he was subbed on in the second half.
He was not on the injury report, which John's eagle eyes said, hey, that means he's available to.
Now we know it means nothing.
But all credit to the team for using whatever dark arts it was to get those guys ready to go, and hopefully they're ready for the stretch run here. And I guess we won't believe lineups until we see them an hour before or even on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, but rotation-wise, I think, you got obviously the desired result, which was the win, but you got, about half for Paul. I think he came out at halftime for Skundrich, and then you got about 60 minutes or so out of Nahar, which is solid and probably tells me they're both available for the weekend. And Heinz put in, about a half hour, maybe a little less, which was probably some good needed time for him. We haven't seen him since, May,
No,
June?
it's been
June.
a minute. He looked like we're going to go, too. He had a
Yeah.
couple iffy fouls that I probably wouldn't have committed so close to our defensive box, but I think he was just excited to be out there and kind of have his impact on the game. So I'm glad, as we're managing minutes, he was able to get on the field tonight, especially as we go into these last two must-win games.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about the flow of the game and how things developed. But I am curious if we've been in a situation where we were chasing the game. Maybe we give up an early goal instead of getting that early Kevin Paredes strike. If Paul comes out and you go with that very defensive mindset, by the end of the thing, I think we were playing 5 at the back. It was definitely a situational game, and something that we've frankly been looking to see from Losada throughout the season. But now that we were into games that really you have to have, it's a big deal that the coach was willing to say, we got a goal, we got what we needed, now let's defend and let's get out of here with 3 points.
Yeah. I'm curious, Black, you were listening to the presser as we were walking back from the game. Hopefully we'll be able to plug that at the end of the pod. But did anyone ask or not about tactics? Did you have anything to say about that? Because as we've mentioned, absolutely right. This is a stark contrast to what we would have seen at the beginning of the season, I think.
The biggest question was, as far as the team's mentality versus the game that may or may not have occurred this past weekend. And that was most of what the discussion was.
Okay.
To my memory, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion of how they were going to approach this game and particularly lineup decisions or things like that. But the coach was definitely more upbeat than he was after the game on Saturday, because that was not where you want to be down the stretch. So.
Yeah, so I wonder how we feeling. Obviously, right, jazzed to get that point. Audi Field was so hype and excited after that game. Really, really loud for a Wednesday and pretty packed, as Joshua said. The supporter section was really loud. So, we got the goal, we got the 3 points. I think we're in 7th now. We looked at the live table.
Yeah.
A couple other scores didn't go quite our way, but 7th is still a playoff spot. So how we feeling?
And Jersey's in 8th. So
Yeah.
Yeah, as you look at the table, the East is just nuts. Columbus had a big win tonight. They're only 3 points behind us, so it's not really where we want them to be coming into town on the weekend.
But our goal differential's gone now.
Well, we play Columbus.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So it's another essentially 6-point game.
Yeah, and the good news is, we're on 13 wins on the season, which is the first tiebreaker, right? So we're in decent shape against teams like Columbus. Montreal still have a game in hand.
How many points behind are they?
Montreal's 1 point behind in 9th. They're behind the Red Bulls on wins. And Columbus is in 10th. They're 3 points behind us on 41, but they play us on the weekend. So if they win, they're going to be in a really good spot. Whereas if we win, we can eliminate Columbus. And it's hard for me to do math on the air after a few beers, but I'm pretty sure there is a scenario this weekend where we could clinch. I haven't figured it out yet. But I think there might be the midweek games are going to make it a little tough, so it might be like
having one in hand is tough too. They're
well,
probably playing
Montreal
Wednesday.
plays Red Bulls.
Montreal plays Red Bulls. Red Bulls have a midweek game next week, so they still have a game in hand.
Yeah, and so does Montreal, I believe.
They play like Canadian Championship or something. They're playing like Forge FC or something.
Yeah,
Random.
Montreal
Forge.
still is only on 31 games, so they've got to pick up a game somewhere here.
Yeah. So they play Montreal. I got the Red Bulls up. But
This is a live podcast.
Montreal play Forge. Oh, they played Forge FC. Went to penalties, won 8-7. But they play Red Bull on Saturday, and then Wednesday, November 3rd, against Houston Dynamo. That probably should be a win for them. And then Sunday, they play Orlando City.
So we essentially just have to keep winning.
I would feel more comfortable if we did.
Certainly, yeah.
It's much better to be in a position where you have points and are not having to worry about other people.
So you have
Again, we've got control now that you are in a playoff spot.
Yeah,
going
I
down the
mean,
stretch.
Less control than I'd like with them having a game in hand.
Well, what's interesting is, I mean, I think at this point, you know, DC United, man, I was going to say, you're right, with that game in hand doesn't help, but they can't really pass anybody. I mean, there are teams above them that they can pass, but the likelihood of that happening is very good. It's you're trying to keep these teams at bay.
Oof, you're right.
So we are playing for that 7th playoff spot, as Hernan said.
Playing for another
Wait.
road trip to Nashville.
What? How many points do we have?
44.
The DC United app is wrong.
Shocking.
It has us in 7th. It has us in 7th with 42 points. New Jersey Red Bulls below us with 44 points. So I know it's
Woof.
yeah.
So
Sorry.
so we're not going to use that app. But back to the game. You know, it started off with DC United pressing upfield fairly well. You know, not. You know, obviously when you play the Red Bulls, you're going to be playing a team that's going to press you throughout. But DC United created early with a great ball through. Robertha kind of shrugged off his defender, played the ball across.
Hola.
Where and frankly, I would love to see Ola finish that, but it's almost just as well that he didn't touch the ball at all, because Kevin came in, and I think I turned to you, John, during the game. It was like, how many times during the Ben Olsen era would you have not one but two guys at the top of the six looking to finish a cross coming in? It was fantastic to see, and you know, it was clear that the joy on Kevin's face to put the ball back in the net in such an important game.
Yeah, and his little individual post-game celebration too. He was feeling it, even though he came off early.
He was limping behind the line. Yeah, hopefully that's not too serious.
I was say, did you actually notice the limp? I was gonna say, I
Yeah,
didn't.
oh, he was limping.
That's not great. I only saw him dancing, so.
Hopefully, it's just like the ice pack underneath.
Yeah.
Hernan said afterwards that it was not a recurrence of a previous injury. It was a knock he picked up during this game, but he had no further update on timeline or anything like that. But he was standing around and having a good time in the post game, so hopefully that's a good sign for him moving forward, because we definitely need Kevin to be upright and playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, so yeah, it was great to see him score the goal, and then I've hinted, I've maybe even said it a couple times, but stylistically pretty similar teams that don't want the ball. They just want to go. And so it was a little bit frustrating after the goal. We started to try to play possession, and you could see a couple guys getting caught on the ball. Gressel didn't have a great game. He was caught out a couple times. And then we started gradually leaning into just chuck it upfield and let Robertha and Ola chase it, maybe body someone a little bit and earn a corner or something. And we had plenty of corners, and I think we got better and better at that towards the end of the game. I think maybe they were trying to go for a second goal there for a little bit, but yeah, don't give Red Bull the chance to break quickly. They did a good job of shutting down anything that could have happened.
Yeah, no, I think the difference between Benny Ball a la Ben Olsen and what Losada was doing tonight is that, yeah, we were chucking it up the field, but we knew where to kick it to where our forwards were in the general vicinity, and we had 1 to 2 forwards who were actually up the field and able, if not to win the ball, to at least pressure the defense and relieve a little bit of the pressure so the team entirely could press up the field a little bit more. So even though Red Bull, maybe it wasn't DC United's great best great pass forward. New Jersey was able to collect it and send it down the field a little bit. We had at least time to kind of reshape and figure out what our system was, so that way they weren't just getting another shot off immediately.
Yeah, and I think the forwards deserve a little bit of credit for the work they put in. Kamara has surprised me. He is now 32. He's like 32 and maybe a handful of days, but he's hustling. And tonight was weird. He wasn't playing the 9 position. Roberto was occupying that spot, and I thought he did a great job too. Roberto's always been the one to hustle, and they did well pressuring and running down those long balls. So credit to them. Maybe didn't get the chance to put the game away or except for Roberto's ball across to Kevin, but great work from the top to help set up the rest of the team.
Yeah, and that's not a bad approach when you're playing a high-pressing team, is playing big balls over the top and letting your forwards run onto it. Roberto is not necessarily the player that I would look at and say he's a guy who's going to beat the defender to every ball coming over. But he did what he needed to do on the goal. Again, that wasn't from a long ball over, but again, that was clearly the approach that the team wanted to use. And, there's a number of times where in a different game you would have seen them try to build out a little bit, but instead they were playing big balls over the top and hoping for guys to run onto it. The number of times that you saw Kamara and Paul switching sides at the top and Roberto really occupying that center attacking role as not a target man, but a furthest forward guy for when the ball comes over and you start that foot race. It was definitely a different look from DC United, and I'm for one, I'm encouraged to see that this team is able to shift a little bit. The number of times that Hernan has talked about wanting to play his style, and that's what we're going to do game in and game out. It's nice to see that the team can shift a little bit, and it's very nice to see them get the reward for that work today.
Yeah, I think Hernan's he's still evolving and changing things within this team. Another little wrinkle that I noticed is Donovan Pines goes up for these goal kicks now. I don't know if you noticed. Speaking of Ben Olsen, kind of remnant of his last days with DCU, that like where everyone crowds like 1/4 of the field or something like that.
Yeah.
But now Donovan Pines is like up there with Roberto and Kamara, and he should beat almost anyone in the league.
Well, he does, and then he just heads it out.
He did that a couple times too. But yeah, so it's encouraging to see this team try different things and succeed, especially as we go into the stretch where, yes, all these games are finals. But if we do make the playoffs, we're going to have a wrinkle or two against the best teams in the league. And I thought it was good that we were able to execute a couple things tonight that were those.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I was going to switch gears, so please.
Oh, no, I've been saying, just play the system, but I have to give credit to tonight. We did see a shift and we did see it work. And just what Joshua just said, when we make the playoffs, we are going to play teams that are better than DC United, right? They just have more talent. They've had more time to get cohesive. So seeing that we kind of have known how to put teams under pressure and finish games that way, but now we also know how to sit back a little bit and kill games off by getting an early goal, I think bodes well for us going into the stretch and then hopefully further than that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think different than some of the years in the past when DC United have kind of snuck into the playoffs at the end of the season because they either got hot or they were just, sort of kind of good enough to get in. Looking at the teams we'll potentially see in the playoffs, should we make it? We've hung with and beat all of these teams except for New England and Orlando are the two. I don't believe we beat Orlando this year, but everybody else we've played very close. And Orlando's obviously one we should have beat or at least drawn away.
Yeah, and New England has the bye for the first, so at least we don't have to play them in the first round.
So I mean, there's nobody on this list I look at of hey, we get that 7 seed, but then we're just totally out the first round because we got to play this team. I don't feel that with this DC United team, which is different than I have in the past. I mean, they've still got injuries, they've still got fatigue, they've still got their problems, but I do think on their day they can compete with anybody. And my question for you guys after watching tonight's game, it's been since the Chicago match a month and a half ago that we've kept a clean sheet other than the Nashville game, which was a miserable 0-0 draw for everyone involved. But obviously the weekend shipped 6 goals, and they've recently been giving up goals at a little bit of a higher rate. Tonight they kept a clean sheet. What do you guys think was kind of the difference defensively tonight?
I'll go first. it's a different type of work ethic and grit that we're seeing right now. And right before we went live,
Black just got bingo.
Right before we went live, we were listening to the post game, which again we hope to put at the end. But Bill was talking about how it's really an entire team, not just the rostered team, but the coaching staff and the backroom staff, like everybody who's really giving their all to make sure everybody's in the right mentality and moving forward. And especially after the game that shall not be named this past weekend, right? Everyone really wanted to shift gears and focus forward. And again, that just bodes really well for this team and moving forward and being able to, regardless of the circumstances, shift into that right gear and get the result when it really matters.
I don't know if I'd chalk it up entirely to grit.
Well,
the team certainly played solidly defensively.
Yes.
You watched through the 90 minutes today, and the Red Bulls had a higher XG, but there was no one single opportunity that you thought, wow, this team really stood on their head and made a key stop at this point, whether it was Bill, whether it was one of the defenders. There was nothing that was super threatening. The Red Bulls failed to execute for sure, but a lot of that comes from what the defense did.
Hold on. Are you saying Bill wasn't good for one this game? You didn't have to be.
I think that potential
No,
one
he
was off target. I will say the one that I literally turned to you and was like, "Was that the one?" And
he
you were
might have
like,
stopped
"I
an
think he was off
Olympico
target."
tonight. No, I think he stopped an Olympico tonight.
That's possible.
No,
That's possible.
I will say that Bill's. If we're going to say, as we say, that Bill's worth one,
As Michael Black says, and then
So I
we
just
quote,
won my bingo card. Yeah.
that having Bill at the back organizing and getting people in line and doing what he needs them to do was very valuable tonight. There were a number of set pieces we were seeing, a number of corners that we were seeing come in where the team had to deal with it. And for the most part, they did a very good job of handling it. There were a couple of nervy moments, but nothing that ended up costing us. So again, it's so great to have Bill at the back there. And as Sam was talking, in the post-game press conference, Bill was talking about how important it was for the team to put this last game behind us and to come out and have a clean sheet. He mentioned Nashville being a clean sheet as well, but to really just forget entirely about that horrible performance in the Bronx, where basically everybody had glaring errors. And if you have an error like you had in New York, you're going home with maybe a point, maybe no points today. But they played well.
So just to be clear on what I said, I don't mean grit via the past several seasons where it was just like, if we work hard enough, we'll get some type of result. I think the grit that we're seeing and the effort and mentality that we're seeing this season is that work is being done in practice, and that work is being done, in the video room and just beforehand, and everyone getting their mind right. So when they step onto the field, they've already done the work, and there's obviously the work to be done in the game, but everyone really knows what their role is. They know what to do, and you can see that shift in tactics in this game, and you still see the result out of it. So I think it's just generally working harder. We make a lot of jokes about Lasada and his fitness mentality at the beginning of the season, but that's not just fitness, right? It's also soccer know-how and, being able to read the game and things like that. I'm sure he's worked with each player individually and all those things, and that's kind of the mentality that I was referencing.
And it's interesting you talk about fitness, because earlier in the season, it was very clear that Lasada would only put guys out there who were 100% ready to go, willing to hit the levels that he was expecting from them. It's also been interesting seeing that change over the course of the season, especially down the stretch here. He said that we don't expect playoffs this year, but he clearly would like to win the games to get in the playoffs and give this team a chance to go forward. He played guys like a guy in Paul who was only good for 45 tonight, guy in Brendan Hines-Ike who was only good for about 30 minutes. I think Nahar ended up going the full 90 or just under.
About 60-some. He came off for
you're right.
for Hines-Ike, I believe.
ODS.
Oh, that's right.
Because
Yeah.
the champion on.
So again, you made this change late, but clearly, part of that may have been just the sheer availability of players, but part of it too is a willingness to understand, hey, this is what we've got to do to get points, and they got the points tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot in this game that I would like more. I would like our players to get healthy. If you're talking about Hernan demanding 100%, and yeah, I think he has eased up on that, but Yamil must be one of those downloads that gets stuck at 99 because he is just gone.
Dude, I'm telling you, I saw him on a milk carton.
No, this would have been a great game for Yamil to come in for Paul and play that kind of role.
That's where I'm going with. I do not understand Skundrick's use in this team. We had Adrian Perez on the bench, who in the beginning of the season was able to do. He came in, I think, 2 games ago and seemed to do decently enough.
He's not an outside back, but other than that,
yeah.
I think they kept him out tonight primarily just because we weren't chasing another goal. I think we would have expected. I would have expected to have seen him if we were tied or down.
We had the luxury of managing minutes tonight.
Got to take advantage, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just saying we.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Not got lucky, but it was good for us to be able to do that.
And I mean, Griffin Yow's another one that I'm surprised we don't see a few more minutes on. Granted, he got 45 more than Yamil did in New York this weekend.
That was. I don't know if we can count on that for much.
I just can't see Skund. I don't know. I guess he brings the hustle or grit, not TM Benny Ball area grit. He just hustles around, but I don't know, man. Yeah, it's frustrating for me. But yeah, I would like to see our dynamic players back, and I thought Adrian Perez was that in the beginning of the season. I would like for him to be it again. I think we need those guys. Late in the game, we're trying to kill time. I was like, Yordi Reyna needs to be on so he can win a throw in and just like get a corner from it because he's so good at that. And he kind of brings attention away from that right side because he can sometimes score goals. I would love those guys. I would feel a lot better, especially if we do make the playoffs, if we had those options. Flores is a whole nother can of worms, but it would feel a lot better if we had some dynamic pieces to put in.
Well, and it's interesting when you talk about what you have available and the tools that you have available. You're right. Yordi brings a different dynamic than the other guys do, and each of the guys has a different weapon and a different approach that they bring in, which I think is kind of inherent in the roster that Losada and Lucy Russian have inherited coming into this year, is that you've got a lot of different guys who do a lot of different things, but if one of them isn't available, you don't necessarily have a like-for-like replacement, where if you're going to be a system-driven team that lives and dies on playing a certain way, you would ideally like to have several guys who you say, oh, this is their skill set, and you just slot them in and fill it as you need to. That's not necessarily the way the team is built right now.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. If you even just like look at the number 9s we have a bit Villa, who is good at very good at holding up the ball late in the games and driving towards goal, earning corners. His game is completely different than Ola's, and if Ola gets hurt, I think we're screwed because his game is completely different than Roberta. So, and it's like that almost all the way down. Our wingers are like that. Our outside backs. Gosh, Joe.
Oh, my
I look forward to you joining Ulysses Segura down in Austin. You'll do great things down there.
Man.
But
hey, Charlotte's got an expansion draft, right?
That's right. Yeah,
I think they already have a outside back, right?
They do. They do.
Fuchs, right?
4-man back line is set up for success. Not a 3-man back line with Fuchs either. So they're committed. I think just closing comments, at least for me on the defense tonight. I saw resiliency, which was something that you got to have at this point in the season. They really had a bounce back performance, and a lot of those guys were on the field in the first half this weekend when they got shelled. And so for them to come out and play the way they did tonight, that's credit to them. They deserve a lot for that. Coming back. Granted, they were still in the thick of the playoff chase coming into tonight. They certainly have positioned themselves even better now.
Yeah.
But man, it's not easy to ship 6 goals. They shipped 4 in the first half before a lot of them came out. But I thought it was an impressive turnaround from them. Before we shift forward or Joshua throws his mic out, TBD, let's award a man of the match. Does anybody want to go first tonight?
I want to go last.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Michael?
Bill Hameed.
I mean, I am wearing a Bill Hameed jersey today. He played great, but it was not necessarily the reason we won. For me, today was all about defense. Kevin had a fantastic strike early to put us ahead, and the team very much was ready to defend for the next 80-plus minutes. particularly from Donovan Pines and Steve Birnbaum. They both did everything you ask and more, clearing balls out, doing what they could. I gave it to Donovan Pines last week. He always seems to pop up when you need him. For me, a little bit sentimental. Steve Birnbaum played his 200th appearance for DC United today. So for me, both of them are very close, but that edges it for me, and I'll give it to Steve Birnbaum today.
He was the man of 200 matches. I had to turn it on you. You stole my whole bit, man. No, I honestly, I think even...
Hey, this is what happens when you ask someone else to go first.
I know. Damn it. I think I'd learned by now. No, I'll go second, and I'll agree with you again, which means I got to do better next week. But, yeah, no, I actually, even before I saw the 200-game mark for Steve, which is an impressive accolade to hit here in the black and red, but I thought he had some really impressive kind of coming out of nowhere moments tonight, especially in that second half when, Red Bulls were coming forward, DC United were potentially trying to get into position, balls were coming in the box. He had some clear, that's good. He had some key clearances in order to keep the clean sheet. So, yeah, for me, and I got to be honest with you guys, Steve Birnbaum's kind of one of those guys I think that flies under the radar for me a lot on this team just because he does his job and he does it very well. But tonight was one of those nights that I really did notice it, so I'll give him the shout.
And the guy who wasn't starting at the beginning of the year, he was still hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anybody not been hurt all season on this team? Is there anyone on this roster that's not spent time actually hurt?
Griffin, yeah.
Julian Gressel has played a lot of it. I think he's been its leader for DC United.
Yeah.
Just me knocking on wood.
Yeah. Speaking of Julian Gressel, I'm wearing his jersey black. No chance for the man of the match tonight.
I was going to say, what?
I was primed. I was on FB Ref today looking at stats and scarily shot creating chances or shot creating actions. Julian Gressel is the only player on DC United's team in the top 136 for shot creating chances.
So he is 136.
Nobody else has registered enough games.
He's fourth. The next one is Andy Nahar, who has missed a lot of games, and then Kevin Paredes. So shots. But yeah, I was ready for Julian to have a great game, maybe assist Ola, so he get closer to 20. Ola did not get closer to 20 tonight. The best player setting up the unanimous for Sam to break, it was Steven Birnbaum after a terrible game on the weekend. Steven Gerrard moment where he slips and lets it go in. Damn. He was all over the place tonight and really showed strength. And yeah, we lose track of him because he's not the big signing that we pull from Atlanta. He's not one of our homegrowns, which it makes up most of our back line now. But he was a solid draft pick a long time ago, and he's a good leader for this team, and he was so good. I was watching some of his mechanics, especially for on Red Bull's long balls, and he would always have some sort of trick to throw off the offensive player. He would either stop short and then accelerate quickly to where the ball was actually going to throw off the attacker, or he would go far and then come back. It was awesome. And then in the clutch moments, he was able to take the ball off. So my man of the match, Steven Birnbaum.
I got to just point out real quick before you go, Sam, but we all kind of gawked a little bit when you were leading into Gressel. I didn't think he had a terrible game. I just thought he had a kind of a pedestrian game.
Yeah. Not a man of match.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't want everybody to think we're attacking Julian. Like, he's allowed to have one off game.
That's fair. I mean, Steven is such a good shout. He's been one of my favorite players on DC United for years and years and years. I was commenting, and I might have done it before on the pod. I feel like stop. He's like 20 years ago, he would have been like the number one center back for the men's national team. He's such like an old school center back in that he just like clears the ball, he heads it, he wins it all the time, but it doesn't necessarily go to DC United, right? And that's not necessarily a crack because he's doing his job, but I feel like the new school center backs are better at keeping possession. What?
You know when you're listening to a podcast and suspense is building, you're waiting to figure out what they say, and you get a general sense that their other hosts know what they're probably going to say. For Sam's man of the match, I have no idea. I live with her. I have no idea what she's about to say.
I will say Sam's man of the match is always the biggest question mark of the show. Yes. It is, unless Kevin Paredes scores like a Hattie or basically has a bad game, and she picks him anyway. We have no idea where.
Brian
I
Green-
know you're building up the Steve Birnbaum
But
thing to say it's not him.
it can't be Kevin tonight though because he got subbed off.
And he
So,
scored a goal.
yeah.
And so,
That's 2 disqualified.
So it's not Kevin, but Brian Greenberg might as well be here because in the comments he said, "Wonder who SK votes for." Oh yeah, KP. Not him. Obviously, we love the goal. I would have loved to hear him in the post game just talking about the Atlantic Cup winning it because he was, born and raised DC United player. Whatever. I'm going to go with Bill Hameed. I think you all underrated him a little bit this game. I do think he came up with some really big saves that kept us in the game. There were a couple, goal stopping. I don't care what the XG was. Like, there were a couple that should have been in the back of the net and could have had, certain other DC United goalkeepers been in the net. I definitely think Bill was a difference maker this game. My other honorable mention is Russell Knaus, who I also think this season has gone pretty underrated, but he makes just the nature of the position, he makes a lot of key tackles that don't get the acknowledgement because they're not fancy or they don't lead to anything really pretty, but he does really well. What were you gasping at, Josh?
I was gasping at you wanted him benched early this year.
Who?
Russell Canals. And I had to make a whole
Oh my
argument
gosh.
about how he was
Oh my gosh.
shortly removed from a USMT cap, and he was the heartbeat of this team for the 2018 push.
I never said.
You broke your mic.
Sam broke a
See?
mic.
And spent some time injured this year, too.
But yes, Russell Canals deserves credit.
Just threw a beer on the ground.
Oh, man.
Shambles. If we're giving honorable mentions, I agree with Sam. I did think Russ had a good game tonight. I also think that I was trying to figure out what Sam's playing. I thought you were going over there to fix the mic.
Bill was also good. Yeah.
No, of course Bill was, but my boy Joe Moore actually did put in a decent shift. Y'all kind of took a little dookie on him, but he's not fit for this system. We've said that a million times, but he had some clutch tackles. And, when Joe lines up for a tackle, I really appreciate how he slides like a good 10 feet into the tackle, and still it's a great clearance. He's so fun to watch. I'm going to be sad when he's not on the team next year.
And yeah, he's a nice guy. He doesn't deserve to be drugged through the mud like I have done recently.
Bro, you led with nice guy.
He's just not meant for this team at all. He's great in the 4 in the back where you don't want your outside back to put in crosses or just be a threat on the dribble. He's neither of those two things. He's defensive. And that's fine.
Well, hold on. I will say he right before the end of the bottom fell out of Lucharu that first year, Joseph Mora was a stud, and he was always getting forward in that 4-man back line. Mm-hmm. It was just that the system allowed him to do that, and I think now he's asked to either be forward all the time as a wing back, doesn't really suit him, or if they ask him to play as a center back in the 3-man back line, well, then he's got to defend exclusively, and that's not really where you want him defending either.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If alternate timeline, Ben Olsen is coaching up in Toronto, he'd be great trade bait for them up there because they need help defensively.
True.
What a tangent.
Yeah. I lost track of the conversation. Fixed my mic.
It does go back to what we were saying as far as, players who fit, players whose skill sets are useful. And if you're in a team without a salary limit, then you can have guys who can slot in when you want to shift to playing 4 at the back or playing a very defensive model. That's great. But unfortunately, that's not the universe we live in. And there are other things that we expect that DC United could do with those dollars. So we'll see what happens in the offseason. I have no idea where Moore's contract is at the moment, but I have to imagine that they'll find a way to acquire some GAM or what have you. Speaking of which, how awesome is it that Cincinnati had to pay us more money for getting Lucho, even though they're still, bottom 2, bottom 3 on the table?
Well, I mentioned the shot creating actions thing. Julian Gressel is not 136, guys. He's 4th in the league, 3rd. After, I think, Gil and Reynoso is Lucho. He's been pretty good for a very bad Cincinnati team, and maybe this team would be better with him. But you know what? We can talk about that another time.
We'll edit that out. As we look forward to the weekend, before we dig into the Spirit and Loudoun schedule, we'll talk a little bit about, as we're into the final 2 weeks here, some tasty fixtures, if you will, on Saturday, and they line up in a nice way to actually watch a lot of them. Inter Miami plays New York City at 1:30. That's a game that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot to DC United. Miami was ahead of Atlanta tonight for a minute. I think they're essentially eliminated from playoff contention, barring some form of Armageddon. Real Salt Lake plays San Jose. Nobody really cares. But then at 4 o'clock, Red Bull Montreal, which is a big game for DC United. Both of those teams are 1 point behind the black and red, and they both have a game in hand. So a big-time draw is really what we're all looking for there in Jersey. And then at 6 o'clock, DC United is back at their standard 7:30 kickoffs now, is Atlanta United and Toronto. So that's a game that, like, sort of maybe kind of matters to DC United. Atlanta are 2 points ahead of them in the table. They do still have a game in hand, but it's possible the wheels could come off. I don't believe that they will.
It's only 2 points. Listen, DC United's app was wrong earlier. They were like 6 points behind. I was like, oh, you're right. We're not catching anybody.
Do not go to DC United.
Totally doable.
Sorry, Zach. Don't go to DC United's app for
I don't think
your
Zach does
tables.
I don't think Zach does the app. We love Zach.
But yeah, I mean, certainly the game of the day is ours. We've got to beat Columbus to stay alive. We've got to beat Columbus to position ourselves well. Hopefully, the other dominoes fall the way we'd like for them to, and it all sets up for a fun decision day in just under 10 days.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry, Black. Essentially, if we win the next 2 games, we're in, right? I don't know the exact math. I haven't looked at the exact, but
I'll go as far as say definitely if we win the next 2 games, I think we're in.
Okay.
Yeah, 50 points should be enough.
What?
We're at 44 right now. If you
50. Okay.
Stop.
Like,
You're just in a different reality, Sam. DC United has you messed up.
You're in the playoffs right now. You win 2 more. There's probably a scenario where it doesn't happen and you don't end up in the playoffs, but for all intents and purposes, you can win your next 2 games and win out. And I'm looking forward to seeing what DC United does this weekend against the Columbus team that has to have the game. Our last home game, something that the team has talked about being a advantage for this team. They, like most MLS teams, they play significantly better at home. This is your opportunity to get 3 points and get that much closer to locking up a playoff spot. I would ideally not like to have to do anything in Toronto next weekend, regardless of how bad they've been this year. You don't want to have to make up the decision on the last day.
It's a Toronto team that's gonna want to beat us. I mean, we beat them 7-1 this season, even though we may have saved their future by getting Chris Armas fired. That's a Toronto team that's not gonna want to lose that game, regardless of what it means to us.
Yeah, I just like to conceptualize too. I'm like so looking forward to going into the next 2 games, and y'all can quote me on it. The next 2 games, if we lose and we're out of the playoffs, right? But it's just an exciting place to be, given last season and given a new foreign coach, right? Who are statistically in MLS, like not likely to go like super far, right? I don't think anyone not American has won MLS.
Tata.
Always. Right. So just okay. Well, we blocked that out.
We always forget that.
But it's a very exciting time to be a DC United fan. I just want to again contextualize that even if we don't hit all our hopes and dreams this season, we've got a lot to build off of in the second season, and I'm very excited to even be in this position going into the last 2 games.
Yeah, it's really important, and I'll foot stomp that, Sam. I mean, think of where we were last year, not only as a team but as a fan base and a society. We couldn't even go to games, right? And so at the beginning of this season, if we said, hey, we're just going to come down to the last couple games here, you're going to be able to have a chance to be in the stadium cheering the guys on. It's huge. You got to enjoy it. You got to enjoy it for what it is, and there's agony that we've felt before, and at some point it'll come back again. Hopefully not this year, but
hey, we'd be safely in if the playoffs were still at 10 teams.
Oh yeah. We'd probably rest a couple games.
Oh yeah, man. Miami wouldn't be eliminated yet.
We'd be suiting up, I think.
Chicago would.
That is an interesting.
I mean, Drew Skundrick is, so
Jeez,
it's not a far shot.
That is an interesting dynamic.
Does he pay rent?
To Audi Field to play, maybe
to be that deep inside your head. Sorry.
I mean, that
Indy's got their
guys like
covered.
Nyman and Paredes aren't paying rent. So, back to what I was saying. With the way the season ends up and with the way the playoffs pan out, if you make the playoffs, you've got 2 weeks to get ready for them. They start the weekend before Thanksgiving. I, for one, would like to see what DC United can do if they can get guys healthy over those 2 weeks. Hopefully, we don't have guys going off and getting injured on international breaks and what have you. But
Haven't seen that yet.
yeah, they haven't shown an ability to stay healthy. But I would really much like to see what DC United can do with a couple of weeks to lead up to it and have an opportunity to play one of those games. And it's all for them right now. They have a chance to make it happen. I don't think any of us wants to see the season end next weekend in Toronto, and this team maybe not competing for World Cup, but certainly in with a shout to make some noise in the playoffs.
You know who is in the playoffs? The Spirit.
The Washington Spirit, which what a year, man.
Oh my God,
What a
for the
year.
whole league.
How many games did they forfeit this year?
At least 2.
With a home game in Houston. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been
Oh my God, that was this season.
Yeah.
It feels like it was so long ago.
Yeah.
They
Wow.
forfeited 2 games for
Which
for
we
COVID,
won,
and
to be
then
clear.
one
We did.
at a home game that was played away.
Yeah, we win our away home games.
More power to them.
Only ones in the league, honestly, to win all our away home games. So,
Yes, undefeated.
but yeah, also in the playoffs, super exciting. We've got one more game on Sunday. So
Yeah, who they have this weekend? Houston on Halloween.
Yeah.
it's
And
earlier, yeah.
And
speaking of playoffs,
could potentially be hosting a home playoff game if
yeah,
things go right for them.
Super exciting. We love it.
no, that would be awesome. And the team that's been through hell this year, so well
it's
deserved.
still going through. They're currently
Yeah.
practicing at a high school
in the middle of hell.
Buddy, yeah, we got that.
Speaking of
another
playoffs, teams that won't be in the playoffs, Loudoun United, they played the Charlotte Independents for the 98th time tonight. They lost. They play the Red Bulls 2 this weekend. I think the most exciting storyline in Loudoun United is going to be what league do they play in next year. And as much as I had hoped that this championship thing would work out, perhaps it's time to hang it up and
I think
move
they've
down.
said that it's their intent to stay in the championship as long as possible. I know some teams are transitioning down.
I
But
am
why,
still
though?
fascinated to see. I would love to read the documents in which they got the deals they got in Loudoun, like how much that was predicated on them playing in
Oh, that
the
could be
second
it.
tier, or how this all works, how it's going to play out. It'll be fascinating, but I think if they can get into a third tier league, the soccer might be a heck of a lot more competitive, which is a good thing. At least in my mind, I like watching close games.
I mean, we've talked about Latin a lot over the course of the season, and it's always going to be a struggle when you have a team that is not set up with winning being their first objective. It's hard to win, especially when you're playing against other players who are professionals and going out there trying to take care of business week in, week out. I would love to see Loudoun competing at the USL Championship level. I think having a lower division team in your organization that's still playing at a high level can only be helpful. They've clearly shown that they're not up to it.
Yeah, they're not at that high level, despite being in the higher level division.
Right.
It's tough. But that's their last game of the season, I think, against Red Bull 2. Another team, a very similar situation, that bottom of the table, holding out just to get guys minutes at the championship level.
Gotta love it. We'll talk a lot more about the future of Loudoun United in the offseason, but before we leave you tonight, guys, I got one last question for you, and it's simply this. Who takes home the final playoff spot in the East? Sam?
Assuming DC United is higher than final playoff spot, I don't really care.
I don't know that that's going to happen, but
DC United's making the playoffs.
I like it.
Unsure what else you're getting at.
Michael?
I think it ends up being Montreal. I think DC United actually moves up to 6th.
Wow. Joshua?
I don't see the points on the table. I was not very optimistic tonight, but I don't see any other team besides DC United, if they do make the playoffs, finishing 7th. If it's not us, it's because we missed. To completely go against what you said, Black.
Yeah, no, I think it really is all there for the taking. The last thing I was just looking at is, I mean, the Red Bulls have a brutal run in, Montreal, Atlanta, and Nashville for them, which is not great. DC United have a path. It's there for the taking. Let's hope they do it.
Yeah.
Big game this weekend at Audi Field against Columbus. That's Saturday at 7:30. If you're not already planning to go. If you need tickets, let us know. I'm sure
There are
we'll find a
plenty of
way in.
extra
They're
tickets,
available.
yeah.
We'll make it happen. Just get to the game, make some noise, and cheer the boys on into the playoffs. Thanks
Sounds
for joining
good.
us.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you guys this weekend.